Imagine your entire world shrinking, literally overnight, where a grueling journey that used to take weeks suddenly takes just a few days. Well, welcome to this explainer on the market revolution and transportation. Today, we're tracing exactly how early 19th century innovations completely reshaped the United States. We're going to look at how new roads, canals, railroads, and factories fundamentally transformed work, migration, and regional economies across the young nation.
To break this all down, we're going to follow a really clear cause and effect structure. First, the transportation revolution, then the rise of factories, leading into a vibrant capitalist republic, and finally, new social class divisions. We'll wrap the whole thing up with a quick recap and a transfer question.
Section 1. The Transportation Revolution.
So starting with our first major cause, back in the early 1800s, there was this absolutely massive burst of investment. American investors and the government basically teamed up and poured money into a brand new transportation infrastructure. We're talking roads, turnpikes, canals, and eventually railroads. Before this, moving anything over land, it was agonizingly slow, incredibly muddy, and super expensive. But almost overnight, this new network started stitching the whole young nation together.
Now, let's look at a historical claim and back it up with some real evidence. The claim here is that the transportation revolution shrank travel time and really conquered distances. The hard evidence? Well, for the very first time, agricultural and manufactured goods could actually be shipped reliably nationwide. Plus, rural folks could now easily travel to emerging cities to find jobs.
Okay, pause, check. I want you to hit pause on this explainer for just a second. How did that new transportation infrastructure directly change spatial patterns and markets? Take a moment, think it over, and get your answer ready. Got your answer? The key takeaway here is all about spatial connections. By conquering those huge distances and shrinking travel times, this new infrastructure literally allowed rural populations to pack up and migrate for city jobs. It wasn't just about moving faster, right? It was about connecting previously isolated people and enabling goods to actually reach nationwide markets.
Section 2. The rise of factories. Now, alongside those transportation upgrades, early industrialization was really kicking off in the Northeast. Suddenly, you had these brand new industrial mill towns, places like Waltham and Lowell, just popping up across the landscape. This was a massive shift. It fundamentally reorganized the whole world of work, moving labor completely out of small home workshops and into these massive, heavily scheduled factory spaces.
For a lot of people, this was a wild new frontier. Check out this quote from an observer at the time. The mills provided many young women an opportunity to experience a new and liberating life, and these workers relished their new freedom. You see, for a lot of young women from rural farming families, moving to towns like Lowell was literally their first shot at earning their own wages and living independently from their parents.
But let's test another claim against the evidence. The claim, factory life prompted workers to view their labor differently. And the evidence? Well, even though those mills offered wages and some newfound freedom, workers quickly gained a much greater appreciation for the actual value of their hard work. Eventually, the grueling conditions pushed them to start questioning the basic fairness of this harsh new industrial order.
Section 3. A vibrant capitalist republic. So shifting from the physical causes to the massive ripple effects. This whole new infrastructure and industrial setup triggered a wild rush to purchase the public domain, which is basically just government-owned land. That led to massive westward migration. Thousands were rushing west to get a piece of the action. But a lot of this was fueled by intense speculation. People were taking huge risks. State banks were handing out risky loans using totally unstable paper money that wasn't even backed by gold or silver. As you might guess, that early 1800s frenzy? Completely unsustainable. When the bubble burst, it led straight to the Panic of 1819, which was actually the very first economic depression in U.S. history. It was rough, but the system did stabilize. By the 1820s, economic recovery began, and that paved the way for a period of incredibly robust entrepreneurial growth.
Section 4. New social class divisions.
This booming capitalist economy ended up fracturing Northern society into highly distinct groups. First, you had the wealthy elites, folks with inherited wealth or the new manufacturing leaders, and they largely lived and socialized totally apart from everyone else. Then, a growing middle class emerged. They deeply valued hard work, consumption, and education, dedicating their energy to advancing their social status. Finally, you had the wage workers at the base. They essentially formed their own separate, isolated society down in those mill villages, mostly because they just didn't have the money or the time to advance.
Let's look at one more claim here. The market revolution created strict economic barriers for the working class.
The evidence absolutely confirms it. The sheer lack of money and those incredibly exhausting working hours actively prevented wage workers from consuming the fruits of their own labor, educating their kids, or advancing economically the way the middle class could.
Time for our second pause check. Based on what we just covered, how exactly did this new factory system and the broader capitalist economy create those distinct class divisions? Pause the explainer for a second and think about the structural changes we talked about.
All right, let's break down to reasoning. It really all comes down to the structure of the system itself. The factory system naturally concentrated immense wealth among a few manufacturing elites. Meanwhile, it required managers and professionals, which birthed the middle class focused on education and consumption. But it completely trapped the wage workers in long hours with very little pay, which entirely prevented the upward mobility to define the classes above them.
Section 5. Recap and transfer question.
Okay, let's do a quick cause and effect recap to bring this whole story together. First, the new transportation infrastructure gets built. Roads, canals, railroads. Second, factories rise up, like those mills in Waltham and Lowell. Third, the economy radically shifts into this vibrant speculative capitalism, leading to events like the Panic of 1819. And fourth, society fundamentally divides into wealthy elites, a striving middle class, and trapped wage workers.
I'm going to leave you with a transfer question to think about. History isn't just about the past, right? It's a tool for understanding our present. So how might a modern technological revolution, like say the rise of the internet and remote work, change where people live, how they work, and social classes in ways that are actually similar to the 19th century transportation revolution? Think about how decoding the past helps us understand the massive shifts happening right now. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring those connections.